I don't think I need to see a Suns Warriors playoff series because I think, the expression is styles make fights. And I kind of think that these two teams will bring out the sort of aesthetically worst in each other. I mean, that was a pretty ragged game last night, I thought, and I think that would be a pretty ragged series if they played in the playoffs. So that's my single biggest takeaway from night one. And also the Nuggets are freaking good.
Oh yeah. We'll get to them.
I love this day one of our podcast on the NBA season, and Seth and I are already polar opposites. Give me 7 games of Warriors Suns.
Just hopefully, I just need the Warriors to shoot better.
The game will be, listen, first game of the season. Here's the thing about the Warriors. Clay starts the season slow every year. We'll check in January and see how he's doing. Like him struggling to shoot, no shocker. No Draymond Green for the Warriors, and we know how important he is defensively. Wiggins was terrible in this game yesterday. Maybe he'll shake it off. Maybe this is the Wiggins we're going to get this season from the Warriors. I thought, and they're still trying to figure out how to make this work with Chris Paul and Steph and all of that stuff. I still think Chris did pretty well for them. I know he struggled in the first half. I know we're focusing on his 0 for 6 from 3, but I think the fact he took 6 threes says a lot. And it's something that we talked about last week.
We worried that his hesitancy to shoot.
And there were a couple of times last night where I was like, yo, you got to shoot that one. But I think there's a adjustment period for them. I think for them, it's going to be a slow climb up and they'll play better. I think for the Suns, no Beal. I think they were kind of trying to figure out what they were going to do kind of on the fly and things like that. I thought their bench guys, I thought Yuta Watanabe was awesome. I thought Josh Okogie was the hero of the game for the Suns, but I also felt like the drama between these two teams, man, you could feel rivalry building. And Seth, let's get the tension and the animosity and things like that. I know aesthetically it wasn't great, but I think that's more attributed to day one of the NBA season versus this actually being the what we would see if they had a playoff series.
Well, here's what I mean by this in terms of the style. Like the Suns are going to default to sort of a very one-on-one ISO heavy no matter what, and the Warriors switching is going to play into that. Whereas the downfall of the Warriors at many times is kind of being too loosey-goosey. They're unstructured, but there's a pattern, but sometimes they get out of that pattern and get a little wild. And I think that the Suns playing in that equally unstructured way will just refract on them, and I think would lead to some pretty sloppy games. I think independently, these two teams could have compelling playoff series with a number of other opponents. I just think the matchup of the two of them is less than the sum of the parts.
Yeah,
from a viewing standpoint.
You guys worry about KD at all? I mean, it just seems like he can't create the same amount of separation. And this is a continuing trend from last season when he came back, from that injury. I expected him, and I don't know what we expect out of these guys, to be honest with you. As they get older, we should see regression, but sometimes we do and sometimes we don't. But KD, it just doesn't seem like he's getting the same separation off the dribble. He's already taking, Seth, and correct me if I'm wrong here, some of the toughest shots in the league when you consider as far as like average distance from the defender, and he hits them at what should be an unsustainable rate, but he hits them. So am I overthinking this? I know it's one game and we're not going to play this, but this is more of a trend to me.
He's one of the 2 toughest players in the league to really. Him and Steph are basically like, are they getting good shots? Right. Is that a good shot? I don't know, because like when they don't go in, it looks like he's not creating separation, blah, blah, blah. When they're going in, which for, the entirety of his career they have, I mean, shot the crap out of the ball last year. It's like, he's just dropping jumpers in your face and there's nothing you can do about it. And so it's, I don't want to, if we go a month and he's his effective field goal percentage is down in the low 50s or something like that, then maybe, but I'm not going to be worried about him taking 22 tough shots in night one, because he's going to take 15 tough shots a night, because he's taking 20 tough shots a night every day of the week for the last, 20, 15 years.
Yeah.
My concern with him is he took a lot of bumps in this game one already. Like, there were a lot of times where he would go down and I go like, damn, is KD hurt? Like I kept seeing him hit the ground and I'm looking around. I go like, that's actually concerning for me just because we've seen what we've seen from his health standpoint the past few years, that I didn't like the shots he took, but like as Seth was saying, this is also what KD's offense is and all of that stuff. But I'm more concerned about him health wise and just the movement on the floor. Dave, was the stuff where I was seeing him kind of, he took a hard shot off of a Kevon Looney screen. The next play down, he goes up for a shot. He actually kicked Klay Thompson, but then he fell on his butt. And it's just every time I kept looking, he was falling and falling. And I thought there was a little bit more of like some stuff where I'm like, is he going to be able to survive this for 82 games? Because they need him to play a lot of minutes.
And that's related to the thing I think we would be looking at is if he's not getting to the line at all. His first career, he's been up around 6.5, 7 free throws a game. Last night he took 5. If he's down in the 4 or 5 per game range this year with the amount he's going to play and have the ball, that's I think an indication where he's not creating the kinds of advantages he needs to. And he's a little bit like DeMar DeRozan in like his advantages look different than other players. In that way, I mean that's a very kind comparison to DeMar, obviously, but you know what I'm saying,
right?
Where it's like he gets fouled on some tough shots because he's going to make it if you don't crowd him too much. So I think that would be the other thing that I would be paying attention to is if he's not creating enough of that separation of that panic in defenders' mind that he's getting to the line 6, 7, 8 times a night.
The thing I would say is this is also maybe the transition of him being your number 1 guy and transitioning to a number 2 spot because goddamn Devin Booker looked great yesterday.
Awesome.
He was awesome. Something else. Like, he really picked up the slack. The thing that stood out to me was his passing down the stretch, which was making just plays after plays for the Suns over and over again. And it's like, that's your number 1 guy. And that's a guy maybe one of us should have talked about as a potential MVP there.
I have him 3rd on my preseason.
Oh, look at you.
What he wound up? He wound up with 8 assists. And I actually think, he is, there's been a lot of talk about Bradley Beal sort of being the point guard. Devin Booker is the point guard of this team. He was last year. He has been for a couple years now. That's the point guard going forward for them. And he also, by the way, Josh Okogie is their best defender, but Devin Booker is their second best defender. KD is not the same KD that he was 4 or 5 years ago. Devin Booker puts in the work on that end too. So, I think that for the MVP conversation, like that's actually going to be a big part of it too, is that he actually plays defense.
And I think this ties it back a little bit to not to go back to Wemby, but I think that Mo, you mentioned kind of the nerves and like Wemby wants to be great. Like, you can see it in his warmups and stuff like that. And I think that there's something we've seen, like a lot of players talk about, wanting to do these things, but I think we've seen just the growth of Devin Booker's game over the years from adding the playmaking, from going from, I think he was fairly maligned as a little bit empty calorie scorer on some pretty disastrous teams, to someone who became a better playmaker, a quicker decision maker. And now in the last couple of years, adding that defensive responsibility. And I think that that's really indicative of that desire, not just to be like good, but to be great. And I think that's been it's really nice to see. And a player who's really raised himself, in my estimation, a tremendous amount over the time we've been doing the show even.
Right. The other concern for me though, with the Suns, the one concern really is Nurkic. He was awesome on the offensive end. I thought he was great. He did everything you want and everything we kind of expect from a healthy Nurkic.
Good matchup for him.
He was getting blown by defensively. Chris Paul blew by him 3 or 4 times where it was like, yo, like that's the playoff problem. Like there are certain problems you go like, it's a regular season problem, whatever, we'll figure that out, whatnot. That's a playoff problem because teams are going to go at him over and over again. And I just watched it, and there were times where Curry blew right by him easily and just missed the shot. Like there are going to be time. That's the concern I have for them on the defensive end. Can what he brings on the offensive end outweigh that? We'll see. But I think that's the thing to watch for through the course of the season with the Suns, because it showed its face in this game. And if you're just going to sit there and talk about how great he was on offense, you got to look at what it was on defense. He made a couple key blocks, but overall, when he was on the perimeter, he was barbecue chicken.
And it's like I was saying, it is a good matchup for him to do well offensively, because he's never been a particularly good finisher for a player of his size, and especially since the injuries. And the Warriors, especially without Draymond, don't have a lot of interior presence, so he was able to use his bulk. Does that work the same against Denver?
That's a good question.